Most CTOs think their job is to build a great software. They are wrong. And by the time they figure it out, they had already lost the room. Today's guest spent almost 20 years learning this hard way. He was a CTO who became a product executive. Now he's the person private equity now called him before acquiring a software company. To find it out, the leadership team actually knows what they are doing. He has worked with the companies from 15 million ARR to 60 million ARR, and now he's serving a private equity firm. He's been in the room where the founders had to kill their own products. Even they have started by themselves. He has been the expensive executive who understood he had to lead. And he has written all of it publicly, honestly, and with the zero filters. His name is Tommy Foster. And this conversation, we are going to talk about what CTO's job actually, what it costs when you figure it out too late, and what's coming next for every technology leader who is still building teams in the old way. This is CTO Story. Let's get into it. Awesome. Great. Tommy, welcome to the CTO Story. And yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you do it, and what exactly the surprising things or exciting things you are building right now.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. So, keeping the intro short, I've been building software since the 1900s, so last millennium. On a long journey, trying to kind of seek out what hat fits the best for me. So I've started out as an engineer. It was never like my main thing. I was supposed to be a math teacher originally, but this was in the dot-com boom. So if you could render Hello World on any stack, you got a job right away. And so I dropped out of college promptly and got sucked into the world of software engineering. Shifted more to kind of a management track some years later as I kind of found more of a passion for building business or building products with technology, and then moved to the United States in 2012 to become like a CTO of a small startup. We raised a Series A or raised a seed and a Series A. The startup never really went anywhere, but it brought the world of product to my life. Because up until that point, I had thought that product is the role of product owner in the Scrum process, because I came from Europe where we've always kind of lagged behind a little bit on this whole agile and kind of product-centered and design-centered thinking thing. So like we had gotten indoctrinated into the process of Scrum, and I thought product owner is what product is. It's just moving tickets around and kind of talking to stakeholders. But so back then, I immediately realized there's this thing called product management, and that's exactly what I love doing. And so for the past just shy of 15 years, I've been more on that lane. So I haven't been a technologist by profession anymore since 2012, but I've always kept that thread in my life alive because at my heart, I'm a builder. I love building things, but I'm a product person first and foremost because I care more about the things you solve with the things you build. And at the same time, I'm slowly becoming a hard-boiled capitalist, and I actually care about the businesses you create with the things you build. So anyway, that's kind of me in a nutshell. Fast forward over a number of things. These days I'm a fractional CPO, so I'm kind of professionally promiscuous. I work on different things for different people, whoever needs something. And for the last year, I've spent working with a private equity fund as a CPO in residence, but also working on their tech product data, AI, and cybersecurity due diligence, helping their investment teams make better decisions on what sort of assets to look at and what sort of value creation plans might emerge from where they're at.
Amazing. So you started your journey being a non-software engineer, focusing on who was about to become a maths teacher, and then right now you are a resident CPO, fractional CPO at large private equity fund. Good. I mean, we will talk about this whole journey, and then we will see like what we can get most out of your journey as well for our the CTO Story podcast. Perfect. So based on my research, you built your first website, not for a startup, based on my understanding. Yeah, you
No.
built for one of the music band. This is very interesting. And
Yeah.
You were a musician as well, based on my understanding, yeah? Who accidentally ended up into tech. I don't think so. Like most of the people knows about this, and most of people have a psychology of you do college, you do computer science, become a software engineer, CTO, leadership, and then you go ahead. But you are breaking that myths. Tell me a little bit about like how you build that and what was that journey looks like for the first website.
Yeah, my absolute number one passion growing up and kind of coming of age in the 90s was music, and specifically kind of more underground, more kind of left of the center music. And so I was in bands in the mid 90s, and we were making music that was horribly non-commercial. And it was always kind of a question of like, well, okay, if the mainstream music industry will not adopt this thing that we have, how do we go about this ourselves? And this instilled in me this lifelong uh, philosophy, if you will, of I don't need to ask for permission. I don't need to accredit myself. I can just like figure stuff out and do things. And especially in this day and age of AI, it has again, like it's like another chapter into the book of how has this mentality helped me? Because something like AI that's rapidly emerging, it's just like you just dive in and you start trying what works, what doesn't, and tinkering with things. And so my mentality that I kind of got from that do-it-yourself indie music culture in the 90s has kind of reverberated throughout my career in that I just like dive at challenges, sometimes to horrible outcomes and sometimes to positive outcomes, but it's like it's just trial and error. And you're right, like I actually thought back, my first website wasn't for a band, it was for a club that I was booking. So I somehow at like age 17 stumbled upon like a part-time job booking a local kind of youth organization's rock club where we did like about 100 shows a year. And so this was like 1996, 1997, where like the internet wasn't a huge thing, but it was a big enough thing where like you had to start thinking of like, well, okay, how do we become more present in this medium where gatekeepers weren't kind of guarding who gets access to publish things? And so it was fairly innocent. It was just like, okay, I had been playing around with computers all my life. I, loved playing computer games. I loved tweaking PCs to how you can run this game that your computer really can't really run yet. And so I was very savvy with computers, but this whole thing of like, how do you make a website? And then I was just like, okay, this was around the time when some people were like messing around with GeoCities and like those kinds of things were emerging. But I think I just stumbled upon like a bootleg copy of like, was it Front Page or whatever the software we used back then to WYSIWYG really crummy websites. And I just kind of like learned, I had like a pirate copy of Photoshop and a pirate copy of Front Page, and I built like a really janky website, but it gave me this like clear vision of like, oh my gosh, this internet thing, you can just do whatever.
Yeah.
Like the possibilities are limitless. And so that kind of got the ball rolling. And I was very active in music in general. We had, several bands, and I, of course, built websites for all of our bands. And we had a small indie record label. And so it was just one of those things where like, okay, we have a static website up now. Like it says where our next show is. Okay. But how could we sell records through this thing? So I built like the jankiest possible like 1999 era like online shopping experience. Like there's no shopping carts. There was no online payments. It was just like, here's a list of records we have and send us an email what you want and send us money in an envelope or whatever the heck it was. But it again, like the ball started rolling and it was like, maybe we should have a mailing list. Maybe we should do, this, that, and other. So again, like the whole journey into software was very organic and very kind of experimentation driven. And then of course, I had gone to college in like 1997 and my major was math, but I decided that computer science should be my minor. And because of that, I got just enough formal experience that a friend's dad gave me basically an internship, or like he connected me with somebody, got me an internship just building basically UIs with HTML for a company that basically built these like hardcore middleware systems. It was like truly like hardcore C geekery. And I got this like opportunity to build C libraries with that spat out HTML for these like middleware systems that wrapped these ancient mainframe systems. And it was like my first touch of like real hardcore software development.
Mm.
And then just the ball started rolling from there. But it was really like all of these things just coming together.
Great. No, great. I think this is getting excited. So you build a website for a band, and then you started rolling out for other bands in your community as well. And then you moved to New York City in 2012 as a CTO of a startup, basically. And most people spend basically their whole career to chase that title as a CTO. I mean, it's a CTO is a title. I mean, so but after a couple of years, what happened that you moved out of as a CTO, but you started focusing on product? What was that instinct that you feel like, oh, leave it CTO, but I want to solve the problems? So what was that thought process, or what was that instinct or a moment where you felt like I need to move it to on the product side? Oh, what was that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of like a push and a pull and kind of supply and demand meeting in the center. So for the last like 5 years before I moved to New York, I had already kind of so let me take a step back. Around like 2007, I had this moment where like our record label and kind of all that stuff had grown up to be where I could have made the choice of I'm just going to focus on music. Like I'll make this my career. But at the same time, I had this like lingering thought in my head of like, well, this doesn't seem like a sustainable, scalable thing. And I
Mhm.
don't want to be in my 40s and be miserable running like a barely surviving music business. And at the same time, my appetite for technology had significantly grown. I started getting my first like management roles, and I was working at a fairly prominent Finnish. And I didn't even mention I'm born and raised in Helsinki, Finland. So everything until New York is from Finland. I was working at a fairly prominent tech agency,
Mhm.
and I had gotten kind of the taste of what the commercial side looks like. So I was a team lead. I was responsible for a lot of like not just managing the technology process, but also resourcing and selling. And I wasn't in the executive team, but I was in constantly in these meetings where we were like looking at our numbers, and a lot of my pay was connected to how we were doing commercially. And so I had gotten bit by this commercial bug. But back then, like in the late 2000s, the role of technology, especially in Europe, was still very much kind of the classic IT model, where there's a business entity somewhere that decides what you're going to build, and then the boys and girls in the boiler room just like executed it, right?
Yeah.
And it was very kind of especially in Finland where there's a heavy agency culture. There's not a lot of like fully vertically integrated tech companies. It's a lot of big companies that leverage technology and a lot of like small to mid-size agencies that implement that technology. But anyway, like when I moved to New York, I had gotten kind of bit by this idea of like there's more to this than just like managing a scrum process. There's more to this than just like building great sustainable scalable technology. And so when I came to New York, this was around the time when the wave of product management was starting to hit the East Coast. So product management back in the early 2010s was a little bit more of a Silicon Valley thing. It was heavily connected to kind of the emerging wave of SaaS companies from Silicon Valley. And we raised our seed round. So we started hiring people. I started building out my team. And somebody asked me, well, why don't you also hire a product manager? Because I was hiring a designer, I was hiring some engineers, this, that, and the other. And I was like, what the hell is a product manager? Because of course I was like familiar with the Scrum process. I worked a lot for Nokia, and Nokia was one of the first aggressively early adopters of all things from the Agile Manifesto. And so I was well indoctrinated to Agile and Lean as principles, but I had never been introduced to product management. And I started Googling, I looked up like kind of job descriptions and some early blog posts by product thought leaders. And I was immediately struck by this, like, why would I hire somebody to do this? This is the part of the job as a CTO that I love, which up until that time had been a lot of like, what are we doing? How are we doing it? When are we doing it? Who's doing it? So a lot of this kind of higher level responsibilities. And I was just like, this product thing sure sounds like it's like all the things I love in my job. Why wouldn't I just start pivoting this way. And honestly, haven't looked back. Like I still love technology. I love building technological products, and all of my kind of CTO, VP engineering partners will probably tell you that I'm a little too comfortable meddling with their wheelhouse. But it was very clear, like I need to look at this part of
So tell
the
me
process.
one clear understanding so everybody understand what is the couple of difference that you can think of as difference between CTO's job role and CPO's job role. How both are different.
Well, now we're gonna just like open up all the scar tissue here right away, because I actually think in the majority of cases, not all cases, but the majority of cases, there should be just one C-level executive responsible for all of R&D. Whether you call it CTO, whether you call it CPO, whether you call it CPTO, or you come up with some crazy other title, especially in growth stage companies. So say call it like 10 million to 100 million ARR. There are no two seats for R&D in the executive team.
Okay.
So again, this is my personal controversial take. Not everybody agrees, and I agree that there are contexts in which this isn't true. I think the C-suite role, the CPTO, CTO, CPO role, is an exclusively commercial investment thesis. It's like capital deployment role. And you're not supposed to be a deep technologist, a deep user experience specialist, a deep product specialist. You're supposed to be an R&D investment allocation specialist.
Makes sense.
And that to me is like the biggest gap. Like I talked and I interface with a lot of very talented tech product UX leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the biggest gap by far, like there's a gap from IC to manager. That's a big gap. And not everybody should jump that gap, because, and we can talk about that later, but like ICs are actually pretty awesome. And just because you want to advance in your career, blah, 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 blah. But the biggest gap is VP to C-suite, because everything in your mindset needs to change at that point. And so to me, it's almost like when I went to product, it actually didn't take me that many years to kind of get more comfortable with executive level positions, simply because I was very rapidly much more interested in how are our decisions affecting the P&L? How are we deploying what's on the balance sheet? And that becomes like the core heuristic on, are you a VP or are you a C-level? Is, do you look downwards on the org chart or do you look sideways on the org chart?
Where the CPO or CTO has to look at. Is it sideways, downwards, or org chart on upwards? Where it has to look at.
I mean, of course, as an executive, you do have to look at, you have to even understand what's happening in the operations or the sales or the marketing org. But the key, and to me, one of the key problems we've had with defining the CTO role is that, and I'm sure all of your listeners are going to love me saying this, but because technology is so critical for a software company, we've kind of inorganically raised the VP level technology leader to the C-suite. And we kind of lost a couple of decades of sanity for that, because the things that we usually look for in a CTO are essential. They're critical. They're instrumental to success, but they're usually VP level things. And whether we like it or not, those aren't really things you need in the executive team. And I do want to also underline, when I say CPO, I don't mean Chief Product Manager Officer. Like I mean Chief Product Officer. And I hate that we've overloaded the word product, but product is the aggregate of product management, engineering, data, design, cybersecurity. It's the thing that we sell. And if you hold the CTO, CPO, CPTO title, you need to be responsible for the whole kit and caboodle.
That's true. That's true. So normally what happens? The engineer starts, so let's say the ladder that we have seen so far. A person from college grade come out, started as a journey as an engineer, senior software engineer, tech lead, senior tech lead, VP maybe at the next level, maybe senior VP, and then become a CTO. So this is the journey.
Yep.
The software engineer who move to the leadership role. And when they solve the problem, business problems, because initially they were solving the coding problems or infrastructure problem. Now they are solving the problem of business problems, right? But those people still look at the problem solving with the lens of their engineering problems itself, like process, executions, getting the system right. You call it myopia, if I get
Yep.
it right. Yeah.
Yep.
How long did it take for you to come out of it? Because I'm sure, like, because you have started the journey, you were in CTO, and then when you look at the things differently, what was that moment where you feel like, okay, I need to change this now? And what was that moment? How you figured it out?
Well, there's really no moment, and arguably, I'm 25, actually getting close to 30 years into my tech career, and I'm still working through it. Like we can't escape our biases. We all have biases. It's a breakthrough just to be aware of your biases, because most people don't understand that they have a specific perspective on the world, and it is never the full 360 view.
Mm.
I think the biggest breakthroughs that I can point to in my career is when I very deliberately started working with people from across the aisle. So sales leaders, operations leaders, biz dev leaders, people who look at the whole thing from a completely different angle. And I think that's kind of the myopia that I often speak of is we love kind of wallowing in the comfort of the R&D bubble. I mean, even though we have our frictions between UX and product and engineering, those are easy frictions because we ultimately still just kind of want the same things. It gets materially harder when you need to actually understand the sales org, when you need to understand like sales ops, or you need to understand marketing ops, or you need to understand what motivates an individual marketing person. And I think my favorite type of R&D thought leader material that I love to poop on is any kind of like how to deflect when a salesperson comes and asks for a feature. Like how do you say no? How do you make them go away? When the real question is like, what are they asking for? Why are you wanting to make them go away? Is there validity to what they're asking? And what like,
Yeah.
and if you especially like it's painful on an IC level if you don't understand that, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's toxic on like a manager director level. It is critically horrible on an executive level if you don't put in the work to understand not just how the system works, how the product development or the software development lifecycle works, or how you build the thing, how you maintain the thing. It's really like, how do you sell the thing? How do you create a business? What's your margin? What's your da 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 da, like all that kind of stuff. And that myopia can only be busted by forcing yourself to kind of read the books that aren't written by your own peers. Like we spend way too much reading books by engineering leaders, by product leaders, by UX leaders, and way too little time reading books by CEOs, by CFOs, by COOs. Like, and you're not going to like this because I'm going to tell your listeners to do something that's against your mission. You should stop listening to the CTO story and go find the COO story or the CFO story, and then you should come back because this is obviously an excellent podcast. But that's my
Yeah,
my
no,
big
I
thing is
think I think ultimate the mission over here is to make sure like we hear what exactly CTO does, either CPO or CEO. So ultimate, it's like everybody's mission should be make the P&L stronger and make sure where the funds are allocated, they are generating ROI. I mean, that's the simple fundamental that's everybody live on. So question over here, when the person shift from engineering to leadership, where they have to kind of think about P&L always, like, will this feature give me ROI? How much? How exactly they have to think. So let's create a scenario. Let's say I'm a sales guy and you are a CTO. I come to you. So let's say we are building a platform for, let's say we are solving a problem for, I would say, a marketing company where they are spending every day creating content, scheduling that, editing that, and then keep doing, okay, how to make it more reach, increase the reach, and then get the leads. So let's say that is market qualified leads. So that's the whole like their workflow looks like. Every day morning come in, create content, publish it, keep monitoring. Every day morning come in, analyze yesterday's content. Da, da, da. So let's say we are
Mhm.
solving the problem of this particular marketing automations, just very simple example, and it's gonna save almost like 20 plus hours a week for a marketing executive, right? So now let's say I'm a sales guy of this particular product. One of the customer is asking, hey, you guys are creating images, content, everything, but you are not creating a video. uh, you are a CTO or CPO, and then you know exactly how to think about. So I come to you and I told you, hey, Tommy, this is the feature that a couple of customers ask, and here's the requirement. They are thinking like they can pay almost double. So let's say the subscription is of $100 per month, and they are willing to pay $200 per month for this particular feature. How Tommy as a CPO or CTO think about this? Tell me the journey. I just want you to kind of tell us about how you think and what is the wiring of a CPO or CTO looks like.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously the kind of product management textbook answer of like, well, I will then gather information about how broad the request is, and then I would understand the feasibility. Like, could we add video? How much of an investment is it? And I would go down all this lane of like discovery around the thing, which is great. Like, that's not a bad instinct. And of course, deep down, I'd also have this instinct of go away, sales dummy. We have our own research here, and we know what our customers want. Like, why are you even talking to me? But like, and those are like fine. Those are normal. That's kind of par for the course for a lot of companies. The question I would be also inclined to ask that a lot of people aren't really asking is, what's really the backdrop here? Like, again, let's say this customer that's asking for it, maybe it's like a new prospect. Maybe we could add 10% more ARR because this is a huge customer and we're emerging. Stopping at the P&L is not enough. You know what I mean? Like, business value is one thing, but a P&L can be great or horrible depending on what drives shareholder value. So again, as a startup, sometimes you have to be not just aware of like how does the P&L emerge. It's also like what are the existing and potential future shareholders thinking of? What is an excellent scorecard for the kind of company where we're going to? And so, in some cases, a short-term jolt of ARR might actually be materially more valuable than this, like, as product people, we love building eternal castles and kingdoms where like we always optimize for the 5 years from now, the 10 years from now. We always ask like, is this scalable? Does this fit this like systems thinking frame of reference that we have? And sometimes, and that's where a lot of the friction comes, the thing the salesperson asks is short term. It's not necessarily repeatable. It might create tech debt or product debt or process debt or something we don't like, but it might be the right choice at that time because we might be facing a fundraising round in 6 months, or we might have a board meeting where like our existing investors are like this close to losing patience in our stalling growth rates, and we just like need that one more jolt for them to be believing us, all that stuff. And if I don't, as a leader, understand like, are we playing checkers or chess? I will make bad decisions. Again, most of the time, the whole like, well, let me understand, let me ask other salespeople, let me interview some customers, let me do a market study, blah, 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 is the right choice, right? Because you need to understand, the short, medium, and long-term return on investment on the thing. And you probably have a backlog of valuable stuff that you should be focusing on. And then this thing comes and everything else gets pushed back. But starting from the place of this is a bad idea never ends in a good place. So again, that's why being an executive with access to board meetings, playing an active part in the ongoing fundraising process, or if you're private equity owned, understanding where in the hold cycle you are. Like, is this a time to make big long-term bets, or is this a time where you're just like juicing whatever short-term growth so that our owners can flip us to the next greater fool? Those are critical pieces of information.
Yeah. So this needs to meet like very critical question. We need to think about the customer first, or we need to think about, if we already raised the fund, we need to think about the investor first, which is leading to the next round. What is the dilemma?
Yeah.
This is big dilemma. How you, Tommy, think about this?
I mean, I'm going to get slapped in the face at the next product conference I go to, whoever hears this. But at the end of the day, it is the shareholder value first. But, and this is a huge but, there is no shareholder value unless you focus diligently on customer value. But at the end of the day, you're a business entity. Your job is to create shareholder value. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. I just play by them. Um, you are there to create shareholder value, and you can't like. I know there are people, and they're not necessarily wrong because they're brilliant in many ways, who will say just focus on the customer value and shareholder value will follow.
Mhm.
This is true in most cases, and it is a good basic principle to believe. But when principle and practicality are at odds, practicalities always win. And
Mhm.
I've talked to and consoled many brilliant product leaders who've stuck to their guns and like clutched their Marty Kagan books tightly, and they're fired. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
Because it's not a good place to be a brilliant and dogmatic product leader who's out of a job. It's much better to be a kind of practical and kind of nimble product leader who knows how to roll with the punches and have a job and actually make a difference.
True, makes sense. So, as a CTO or CPO, it is not about just technicalities. It is about managing the expectations of customer, board meetings members as well, and making sure the business is growing. Also, look at the P&L rather than just technicalities. Okay, good. I think this, love it. You wrote somewhere, I think, when I was doing a bit of research about that, like guilty of throttling founder mode, treating it as a bug in the system. I think you joined Teachable previously, right? I mean, when you started your career as a CTO and then kind of you moved into Teachable. I think the Ankur was one of your co-founder as well, right? I think Ankur stepped back and you grabbed the button and you admitted that it was a mistake. What did you do Teachable's momentum in those first 6 months? How was that? What was your philosophy or that time? When you look at the practicalities, what has been changed and then you felt this was a mistake? Walk me through as a leader in the tech leader or CPO. Tell me like what was that moment and your experience about that.
Yeah, I mean, just in case people's memories are short and we don't remember last year's debates anymore, like the whole founder mode thing was this big coming out of Brian Chesky from Airbnb asserting that companies die when the founders kind of step back and no longer impose themselves on a lot of like the practical decisions. And uh, obviously, it was like a heated debate for a while where a lot of people, because it goes against the grain of a lot of the things that we believe as product people, like uh, empathy and empowerment and like hire great people and you get the job done and trust and whatever. And this went completely against the grain. And it basically asserted that the founder is basically the entity with the most context on the problem and like the biggest conviction and most skin in the game as well in success. So it just goes to reason that a founder should lean in heavily. Obviously, it wasn't said that Brian Chesky is a designer, like he's a brilliant designer, like by background. And obviously, you're going to want a person as brilliant as Brian Chesky leading in and influencing product decisions. But um, for me, it was a fairly meaningful moment of reflection because especially with Teachable, where like Ankur wasn't just a co-founder, like he was the founder, and he just recently exited his second company. Obviously, they didn't disclose what the outcome was, but I'm certain it was great for Ankur. And like he's shown time and time again that like Ankur Nagbal, that he is a brilliant founder, a hard-charging entrepreneur. And when I joined Teachable, I think he was a little maybe frustrated with like where the company was going and maybe feeling like he was losing his grip on the company. And I came in, I was full of hot air and hubris at that point. I'd spent some time in venture capital and I thought I knew everything about everything. And I came in and my mindset was more like, okay, grandpa, even though Ankur is like 10 years younger than me or whatever. I was like, okay, you can kind of now take a seat in the corner and I've got it now. Don't worry. And I feel like, I mean, obviously it takes two to tango. I think like he was also, his gas tank was empty. So he was more like, okay, just run with it. So my mindset was more like, okay, I've got this. I'm going to run the show on how this product develops from here. And I didn't put enough time and energy into like me and Ankur, kind of like me re-energizing him to be the founder that I think he is. Like there were like some decisions they had made that weren't so great and whatever, but he was still profoundly the person who knew where the creator economy and kind of online course business were going. And I think my biggest mistake was sidestepping and like not really putting him in a position where I should have encouraged and incentivized him to have
Mm,
ongoing constant friction with me so that I understood to course correct. And I mean, I didn't make any like horrible, like just profoundly destructive decisions, but it took me longer than it should have to reach conclusions. It, I probably left a lot of potential value on the table
mm,
because instead of me figuring my way out into the industry and coming up with good decisions, I could have just used almost like the cheat code of Anchor. And it's for me, it's a good reminder of like the worst mistake you can make as a, I mean, there's many other worse bad mistakes, but a really bad mistake you can make as a kind of hired gun technology leader or product leader is kind of treating the founder as something you're supposed to like supplant and almost like go against rather than
mm.
like you're supposed to be rocket fuel you pour in their tank.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree. And then I think in 2019 itself, right, when you were still in the Teachable, and there was a momentum going, and I think there was a feature called Discover, and everybody was like, yeah, we're gonna do it, and this is how we're gonna do it. And then you came in, and then you said, guys, what's our core assumption right now? We are assuming we need to validate first. And could we do some experiments? And that was the movement, like, because everybody was convinced. But you mentioned, like, as a Tommy, I want to do some experiments. After you told to the boardroom or the co-founders and founders, I'm sure there was something happening in your mind as well, like, oh my gosh, shit, I told this, what's gonna happen now? Tell me about that scenario as a leader when everybody is convinced and you come up with some different ideas. Have you tried to convince what the scenario looks like? Tell us something about so our leader can the other CTOs can understand that as well.
Well, there's that specific thing made me really appreciate how, especially in like early growth stage companies, momentum is everything. And I've made that mistake a couple times since, but like I think I get it now. It's just momentum cures all problems. If you have a feeling of progress, that is a panacea for any problem. And what I kind of my mistake, like Teachable Discover wasn't like a great idea. It wasn't like this thing that completely blew our business out of the water, but it was a decent idea. It had wings. And this was like my first couple of weeks on the job. So I still had this like big need to like assert myself and show I'm of value. And so I went down the lane of like, the classic lean back and like, what are we really trying to achieve here? And how might we validate some of our assumptions and all that kind of basic stuff, which is, again, valuable, basic product playbook stuff, really
Yeah.
important. But what I did not read in the moment was that I was killing momentum. And again, when you have, and as a company like Teachable is right at that moment where on all fronts, momentum was starting to stall because it was not a young company anymore. It had tens of thousands of customers and the product footprint was getting bigger. So obviously, momentum is starting to stall down. But if there are pockets of momentum, the worst thing you can do is to slow it down because, again, a company that believes and feels it's winning or at least feels it's moving is a very different company to work at than a company that's just like slowly stagnating
Mm,
and feeling like every day is the same. So I think my big takeaway there again was I was from a product perspective, I was doing all the right things, but from like a leadership perspective, from a kind of organizational psychology perspective, I was doing all the wrong things.
mm. Interesting. So momentum is everything. When you are the growth stage or early stage, momentum is everything. If the momentum kills, everybody's morale goes down and the companies goes in a way where they should not supposed to be. So great learning. So momentum is everything. Love it. And when you was in Teachable, right, I mean, you know that 50% of people and more of the resources are focusing on payment gateway, I think, if I get that right. And you knew that, like the situation is not good. We are putting so much resources in just payment gateway. And then, but you didn't inform to anybody. You didn't raise that. Why? So in as a leader, when to raise the concern, when not to raise the concern. Tell us a little bit about that, considering that situation. What was your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak pretty candidly about this now because it's so many years since then. It's like hardly anything that damages Teachable's business anymore. Because this is we're talking 6, 7 years ago, and I didn't just say 6, 7 to please my child there. Um, the It was pretty clear that like I said, momentum had really stalled, and a lot of it was because we're like 100 people when I joined, and out of that, probably like a couple dozen, maybe 30, 35, something like that was in R&D. And so we had gone into kind of like Teachable had started as basically like a platform where you can get your course online, and you could sell access to that course against payment with online. And we had done a very good job. We had created a very healthy business on that. But then because we're having a hard time scaling the core business, we had gone into the payment side. So it kind of gotten historically was more like a thin wrapper around Stripe, as most companies that do payments online are. We had started getting a little more thicker in our wrapping of Stripe and doing more stuff on the payment side. And the motivation was a little more on like the how might we add more ARPU so we can get a little more of more of a cut on the GMV that's processed on our platform, which is like solid commercial thinking. But the problem was we kind of went down this lane of exponentially compounding complexity, which anybody who's worked in payments will tell you it is not fun and easy engineering.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but kind of the classic Jeff Bezos decision-making matrix of like, consequential or not consequential, reversible or non-reversible. This was one of those decisions that was genuinely irreversible. Like we had gone far enough down that lane that you can't just like back away and be like,
Yeah.
just kidding. Like,
Yeah, you can't pull the plug. Yeah, you can't pull the plug
yeah.
in the middle of that. Yeah.
So this is one of those things where like you just, in golf terms, you just have to play it where it lays. And even though I loved my time at Teachable, it was like such an amazing market and business. That was always the thing that I really hated, that I had this meaningful part of the product that just felt like a dead end. And not just necessarily a dead end, but also we're well ahead of our skis, right? Like
Sure. Yeah.
doing payments with like 2 pods, and this was pre-agentic engineering, so you had to actually write all the code. Like doing all that stuff with 2 small pods, every day you were feeling like you were losing, like you were not achieving anything. And at the same time, because we had put all those resources on that side, our core product was also atrophying. So it was like a damned if you do, damned if you don't, that you can't back away from that. So I don't really have a great lesson learned on that, but it's like a reminder for people that as leaders, especially if you're like in growth stage or enterprise, like later stage companies, you're going to have some cards in your hand that are not winning hands, and you just have to navigate and do what you can. And so lucky for us, we did get acquired by a company. Like we had a very nice outcome, and a Brazilian company called Hotmart acquired Teachable. And luckily Hotmart was materially bigger and was far further down the road of building real payments capabilities. And so, I mean, obviously I haven't been with the company for 5 years, so I don't know exactly how the story unfolds, but I would sure hope that they ended up being the full redemption of Teachable, because as an independent entity, I don't think that payment thing did have wings. But
Makes
again,
sense.
but to your question, it is just sometimes you have irreversible decisions that you just have to live with, and it's chasing for the optimal solution is almost never the right play. You have to like figure out what's the right move
Yeah,
given
I
these
think
cards.
you are right. In the by the way, in the current situation of agentic AI, the speed is the moat,
Yeah.
and the distribution is the moat, I would say, because the fast you move and the fast you distribute, the more faster you get the customer. I mean, that's where you're gonna win. So love it. So as a now coming back to like we talk about like your journey, how CTOs think or CPOs think, rather than thinking about engineering process, they have to think about P&L, think about okay how the company can make money, and more of like where they need to allocate the resources or allocation of the funding itself. Now, I think a great story that I can learn from you is like If it is not right fit, or if you feel like I'm not in the right position, you need to leave it ideally. And that's what I think exactly you did it at the work step, right? You walk away with a smile saying like, okay, this company needs right now builders, skilled workers who can, or sellers, I would say, who is able to sell faster, builders. But you felt like this is not right for me because obviously being a CXO, it's very expensive for sure. Most executive, by the way, fight for their position and holding in the position where they are. What was your thought process where you thought about as a leader or CXO, this company needs something else and I'm not the right fit, or I'm overfit, or I'm underfit? Tell us about what are the criteria you have to think as a CXO, and then you have to take the proactive decision rather than somebody says you are not the right fit. How to think about that, and what are the criteria?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you are truly commercially minded and you truly kind of take ego and kind of personal stuff out of the picture, and obviously I need to acknowledge that like I approach that from a place of privilege in that like I've been successful enough in my career where like I don't have to worry about periods of unemployment. Like it's this math would be materially different if me leaving a job would mean my child won't get fed next month, and I acknowledge that. But so with WorkStep, we're in a place where since I joined the company, we had made a very painful pivot with the company away from its original core product to its emerging kind of secondary product, which not it didn't exactly like slash the revenue by 90%, but like in essence it did. Like we had to start behaving like a couple $1 million ARR company again. And so that was like a really painful, but also the correct strategic choice we as an executive team made. And I will forever sing the praises of Dan Johnston and Justin Butler, the founders, for being able to do that choice.
Mm.
But so basically we had gotten to a place where we had put all of our bets around this emerging voice of employee program.
Mm.
And we spent a year of like hard, like building it and like really figuring out what is the right strategy here. How do we weave then emerging AI into the picture? Like how do we really, and what customer type do we go behind? And really getting like the strategy and the core of the product to a good place. And then we kind of found ourselves in a place where like, obviously, 2000 or 2023 came around and like the market headwinds hit us. So like, we just weren't growing as fast as we needed to. And it became clear that this was more of a execute the strategy and sell the heck out of what we have thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was a very distinct moment when we had monthly executive kind of or leadership team offsites, and I was just like I was staring at our numbers and I was like starting to realize like a meaningful percentage of the heads of this company is in this room right now, and an even more meaningful amount of the labor costs, because obviously we weren't the lowest paid people in the room or in the company. And I was just like, this is madness. And at the same time, so we had this like weird dynamic where like Justin, the CTO, was also still very involved and one of the smartest guys I've worked with. And he always kind of felt like, okay, we have a CTO who maybe has a little bit of imposter syndrome in terms of like doesn't want to call himself a product leader.
Oh my
And
God.
then it's the classic thing. Like he was the kind of CTO who had gotten to the place by being a great entrepreneur technologist, but probably didn't feel like I've worked in a mature product org for years, so I'm not going to be able to call myself CPO. When he really had everything you really needed to do that. And then you had a CEO who was also very product minded. And so it was like, okay, there's like, I think we had like 7 people in the like VP, SVP, C level in the executive team. I was like, we need to pare down this executive team. And then I started looking at kind of the redundancy, and I'm like, seriously, like my position is the least essential here. And I'm not saying that because I don't believe in myself, but I'm like, of course you're going to keep the CTO founder around because, and he's great and he's been a part of building the whole thing. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense to pay me whatever they were paying me, which was nothing. It just like, it doesn't make sense. For the same price of me, you could have like 3 salespeople or 2 engineers. And like, that would make a materially bigger impact on the future prospects. And of course, I had plenty of options in my back pocket. So it wasn't just selfless, like, oh, sacrifice me. It was also like, if I'm holding a meaningful amount of options of this company and I want to make a bet on what drives the future of this company,
Mm.
as a shareholder, I would love to get rid of that CPO. You know what I mean? Because there's like, and it has, I'm also, there's a part of this that's my personal psychology. Like I love like transformation leadership. I
Mm.
don't love business as usual leadership. It just kind of gets boring. And I
Yeah.
felt at WorkStep at that point, like it's not like I wasn't doing it. There was plenty of things to do every day, but I felt like my biggest impact was in the rear view mirror. It
Mm.
was a lot more about just like manage the execution and perfect the execution. And it's just like it's not what really drives my passion.
I think transformation leadership, you made it very correct because that for me also it gives me dopamine. If I'm doing something exciting, it gives the oh great, let me wake up early in the morning, do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we just talk about normal business, we only look at the P&L. Okay, this month, what was the profit? How much it went where? What does the cost look like? And what is the profit margin? Okay, next month look at the same statement and you are not doing something exciting, I mean, you are not transforming anything, you're not creating impact, so it's useless normally. So love it, I mean, the way that you are focusing in your psychology, love it. So I think in this example of where when to step back, that is very important as a CXO. And I'm sure like we must have an option and then only we need to take it. It should not be a selfless, but that's needed as well. We need to think from the organization point of view as well. So great. You started this journey of CTO, CPO, and different position, different companies as well. But then you pivoted more into, I would say, private equity funds, which is one of the largest private equity fund where you are focusing or uh, you are contributing right now. Your job right now is to walk into the software companies before they get acquired, right? So tell us a little bit about uh, so whoever is right now hearing this or who gonna kind of look at this podcast as well, if they are being acquired or they are trying to sell the company or their startups, you as from the private equity fund point of view, when you go in the particular startups, what is your 1 or 2 days looks like? What exactly you look at the first? Is it you look at the P&L, you look at the customers, you look at the engineering team, you look at the patents, you look at the team? What exactly you as a private equity fund point of view look at the startups?
Yeah, all of that. So, so obviously, if we're talking more about because there's a number of different scenarios in a private equity sense where I would kind of do triage of a company. There's the due diligence part of the thing when we're just looking at a company, and even that is kind of splits into pre-access and post-access, which basically means like usually a private equity fund will look at a company for potentially a year plus before we even get into kind of the actual transaction part of things. And
Interesting.
at that point, you don't really have much internal proprietary knowledge to go off of. It's really just like spy work, basically. And
Mm.
then you have post access, at which point it's like an official banker led process where you get access. Like basically, you can ask the leadership team any questions, you can ask them to deliver any documents. And then, kind of, the third part is post deal when you've already bought a company and you're doing discovery and kind of figuring out how you might help this company. So, and they're all very different. Um, I do a lot of both the first two, and I do some of the last one. I actually like the first part most, which is kind of the so-called outside in discovery, which is like nobody really knows you're looking at this company. Like
Mm.
nobody, you can't just ring up anybody at the company. You're just trying to figure out what you can find online. Maybe you've gotten a couple of like some proprietary documents that, if the company's entertaining starting a sales process, you might get something like maybe they brought Crosslake in to do like a tech due diligence brief. But it's very much like you just go off of what you can get. You try and spy on the leaders, what their backgrounds are, and see if you can find out anything on the tech stack. But it's very much like, and you might call up some customers, you might call up some former employees, but it's very much like teasing out information that you as a tech and or product leader can use to kind of form an assessment. Because
Mm.
basically, then what the investment teams really want to know is number one, are there red flags here? Are there signs that they're doing anything completely unsustainable? Is there a huge cybersecurity risk? You know, this and the other. Then there's kind of the defensibility piece of like, we're looking at a SaaS company, but so what if AI makes all of SaaS go away? Is this company
Mm.
going to still be alive or not? And what is kind of their play on defending against AI? And then, of course, you look at like, what are the kind of value creation prospects? What's the growth play here? Like, if they're a very verticalized company, like, do they have opportunities to expand their TAM by augmenting their ICP? Or, like, what are the ways that we could underwrite some growth here? But
Mm.
again, I like it because it's like anybody can research a company when you have full access to everything.
Yeah, it's
It's
true.
so much fun when you're just kind of poking at what can you find a product marketing video from some forgotten corner of YouTube where they share a little more than maybe they should, or is there a recording of some like conference talk by the VP of product where they
Mm.
share a lot about it's just like fun little
Makes sense.
stuff like that. Then the kind of post access, it gets a little more, it's not so much paint by numbers, but it's more like you get to actually sit the management team down for a couple of hours and ask them questions, and you get to ask them for documents on what their process is, what their roadmap is, what their plan is, what their vision is, and you get to kind of then and all the things you listed earlier, like you kind of look at it all and you try and form an assessment of,
Mm.
do I trust the management's plan? Do I believe the vision of the future they're building? As an investor, are there places that we could actually help them? Could we put more money in
Mm.
to make them more? Can we bring in AI so that this EBITDA margin becomes better? Or can we actually change the proportion by which they invest their engineering team into maintenance versus innovation? Like, can we put more money in so that more of their engineering work goes into innovation? Like all these kinds of things.
Makes sense. No, love it, love it. I think this is very good insight. So there is one is called normally in your word as a spy work. The second one
Yeah.
is informal work where you get the some insight and talk to the team, but you don't get involved after the third part basically where the acquisition gets started and then that's where you're not involved. Okay, great.
I'm still involved in that. So I do some CPO and resident stuff too. It's not like the main part of my kind of mandate, but there have been cases where we've bought companies where either
Mm.
they really fit kind of my background, or like I know something about, like, basically I have intimate information about or experience in their domain or their life cycle stage. So I've done that somewhat, and that's where it gets a lot closer to just your classic consulting, where you get to just like fly to their HQ and spend time with their product and tech leaders, and you get to actually like become a part of their team, rather than just
Mm.
this weirdo from the outside asking them provoking questions.
Makes sense. So you've been kind of moved to this, let's say, in a private equity fund where you kind of before acquisition you do this all the research, right? And during this all the research, due to I came to know that you are also building some robotic research army. Tell me about a little bit about that. What you was doing 6 months back, or let's say a year back or 2 years back, that took a lot of your time. Now you are building this robotic research army, which help you in your daily work to fast track that or make it more impactful. Tell us a little bit about more about that, about what you are building right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a technologist and as a person that's just curious about how I can do things better, faster, stronger every year with whatever is available to us. Like, I'd be a fool if I was just still Googling for facts about companies, right?
Mm.
I'd be an idiot if I spent a lot of time writing different types of reports, or, there's so much manual work that goes
Mhm.
into researching a company. And of course, in the classic, like, why spend 2 hours doing a thing when you can spend 2 weeks automating it? In the classic fashion of that, like, I've started really finessing my agentic bot army, as I like to call it, where I've built this completely crazy setup with Claude Code and Claude Cowork, where I, especially for these kind of earlier stage where like we're just kind of looking at a company, not yet officially where there's a lot of pressure for me to do it, like do more of them at the same time and do them in a shorter amount of time. Um, and my brain is old enough where it just doesn't retain facts well, especially if it's bombarded with like 5 different industries all in the same day. So I've basically built this kind of robotic backbone of my process, which is it just started out as a very simple, I just built a Claude Cowork skill where I just articulated kind of my research process end to end, like what happens when, what sort of inputs I get, what sort of, how do I persist different signal or facts. And then it just kind of step by step, then I built a Python script where basically it just orchestrates a lot of agentic research with the Claude API, where it does a lot of the web crawling for me. Like it's got a certain set of information sources. It has different types of agents assessing different types of facts. Then it has all sorts of summarization and compounding capabilities of like, it seeks the same facts from multiple sources, and then they come together and there's a different orchestrator that kind of summarizes it all. And all this kind of 15 minutes of crawling the web ends up in this kind of
Great.
dossier for me. And it's been fun to just, again, I'm a builder at heart. It's been fun to just like finesse the heck out of like
Yeah.
how much of this workflow. And then again, like there's a lot that happens in Claude Cowork where I built this this SQLite database that's local to my machine. That's basically my like canonical deterministic fact repository, which helps me then when I'm working on 5 different triages at the same time. It helps me persist facts and surface them, and it helps me kind of, and I can on demand at any point ask like, well, what's going on with the Acme Inc. process? And it can tell me like, you're in phase 4 and you've got these facts, and here's gaps in your general heuristics that you have. And I can tell Claude like, well, that fact doesn't matter. That fact's actually really important. Let me book a call for that. It just handles all this stuff.
Makes sense. Okay, great. So you prefer Claude compared to Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever. Love it. Okay, great. I think you might have to look at the paperclip. I'm sure you might have looked at before. That will help you to run all the army, and then you just assign the
Nice.
task. Okay, do this, and then it will do orchestrator on behalf of you, and then assign the task to each other. Love it, because I keep using every day, so I think I've seen like how
Nice.
it's as well. So love it.
I'll have to look into that. It's the reason I prefer Claude is just for some reason the way it allows you to build skills and sub agents just
Yeah,
fits
by the
my
way, you
mental
can
model
use
super
the
well.
same. So you can use
Yep.
the same Claude. So Claude is your employee, and I would say Paperclip is your organization orchestrator, where you can build a lot of employees like Claude Code and Claude and those things. And then you can put, let's say as a CEO, you assign do this. So it will talk to CMO, it will talk to CTO, it will talk to research agent,
Nice.
everything, orchestrate that and give it to you. Maybe you can schedule that. There is a concept called routine. So you can schedule that, when to do, what
Nice.
to do, everything. So it's a so bigger truth. So we are moving to the couple of bigger truths that I want to hear from you. Is like product management normally is we consider as a piece of craft, right? I mean, or do these things very nicely. Da, da, da. So, and most thought leaders emphasize that doing things right over doing right things. And you say this and criticize this as well in the product community. You are basically yelling at a mirror. So let me be very direct. Is the entire body of product and engineering leadership thinking wrong for the environment most I would say companies actually operate right now? So is it like, what is right and what is wrong? Is it like momentum you mentioned before, like keep doing things faster, go in the production and see what works, what doesn't, experiment works? Or is it something like you are thinking like, don't do too much, think what is right for your customer or the one that you are serving, do small but do it right?
Yep.
What is the biggest truth?
Yeah, I mean, and when like the whole screaming at a mirror, it's like whenever I criticize the larger product industry, I'm generally criticizing former incarnations of myself. So I've made every possible mistake, and I've probably written a lot of blog posts that I would really hate these days. But like, I used to be a big believer, and if you just do things right, good things will follow. I was very process oriented. I was very oriented towards doing things by the book.
Mm.
And I've come to realize that that's really not the case. There's nothing wrong about doing, like, there's a lot of virtue in a lot of the processes, a lot of the practices and paradigms that we've created as an industry, but those can't come first. Because
Mm.
at the same time, you have an incredible body of evidence of companies who do everything wrong but succeed because they were doing things right. And I think one of the core sins that we have as product, and when I say product, I genuinely mean product management, engineering, and UX as an aggregate. One of the core mistakes we make is we believe we need to validate everything,
Mm.
even if it's like something like I come to you with an assertion like sky's blue, and you go into this spiral of like, well, let's do a 2-week customer research project to validate if the sky is blue. We do a lot of this, like we just don't believe a thing until we've like scientifically validated it to be
Mm.
true. And of course, there's industries where this is necessary. I won't get in your airplane unless you've actually validated
Yeah.
that dang thing is going to stay in the air. But I think it's really, we've really ignored the value of momentum. We've ignored the value of, well, now the most emerging trend in product is this thing called taste, which is it feels like a pretty hard pivot for our industry of like going from nothing can be known, everything has to be validated, to now putting people with quote unquote taste on a pedestal. I totally get it where it comes from, and I actually really genuinely like the people who push this thing forward, and I agree with it, but it also feels a little bit like an overcorrection.
Mm.
But as a leader, I do think that we should start, and especially now with AI, where it is, again, code has become a commodity. Obviously, we still have bottlenecks in reviewing and kind of getting things maintained and deployed and so forth, but code has become the commodity.
So what is the
It's,
moat? So what is the moat, right?
well, okay, we get into an interesting conversation here because moats can be a little context sensitive. You already mentioned like speed is a huge moat. Obviously, proprietary data is a huge moat. It didn't mean that much before when actual code was a real competitive moat. It's also coming back to like non-technical things. Like if you're in a heavily regulated industry, your brand and your presence can be a huge moat. And honestly, I feel bad for B2C companies because in that environment, moats are getting pretty fickle.
Yeah.
But like in enterprise software, like if you've been serving an industry flawlessly for 10 plus years, just that position in the industry can become a massive moat.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you're kind of, and then of course, at the same time, people is becoming, even though we're like trying to outsource all of our work to robots, the scarcity of really high quality thinking from real
I
high
agree.
quality people is
100%.
bigger than ever.
Yeah. I was saying like actually the software engineering demands is increasing. That's unbelievable. That's what I was looking at. Like the openings are going up. And I was like,
Well,
okay. So I think the people are being replaced. I'm not saying like new jobs are being open, but I'm saying like the people who don't want to change themselves, who don't want to adapt, they are being fired. And then people who wants to adapt faster, that's being hired as well.
the way to look at it to me is like the whole people replacement narrative is completely wrong. It's like if, let's say an engineer was worth X in return to you a year ago, like the cost, that person cost you Y and it was worth X. And now all of a sudden that person's worth 3X or 4X because you can just get so much more done with the brain of a single engineer. Like the ROI has gone up of an engineer.
100%.
I mean, if your position is you're going to just do the same amount of work as you did last year, then the math goes to like, well, we can do it with less engineers. But if you genuinely believe that there are product investments that will drive material value and you can actually get more done with the same cost of an engineer, you're going to want more of them.
Yeah.
Like if I told you that if you give me $1, I'll give you $1.50 back, you'd probably be like, yeah, sure, I'll send you a bunch of dollars. If I told you can now get $3 back for every dollar, you'd empty every bank account you can find and send it all my way.
Yeah, it's true. So now here's as a leader, you've been in this industry since long. Consider Tommy as a senior, Tommy to a junior who is 20-year-old. What is 3 things you're gonna guide them to become a successful CEO, CXO, or as a human as well? What are the 3 points? Very clear cut. 1, 2, 3. Tell me like a little bit. Tommy as a senior, looking at the junior backward. 20 years old, what is the advice that you're going to give to junior Tommy?
The most resonant piece of advice anybody's ever given me, and they didn't mean this in a nice way when they said this, but it's been very important. Somebody once told me in the heat of the moment of a debate that, Tommy, if you're always surrounded by assholes, maybe you're the asshole. And what that really means is, like the reason it's resonated with me is because as a product and technology leader, the fact is your job is to manage a lot of friction. You're kind of you'll be the conduit of many, many organizational friction points, right? And if your bias is always to think I'm right, these other people are wrong, or my department, my craft, my function is right, and all these other people are wrong, bad things will happen because you are very likely statistically to be wrong a lot of those times.
Sure.
So basically, the learning I've taken and why this mantra has been so powerful is to always start from a place of like almost like disassociating, like what are really, like, what's happening here? What are the motivators? Like, for example, most product people don't know that salespeople work on variable comp. They eat what they kill. And if you don't understand that as a motivator, that like, and we all work on static comp, which means like we get paid whether the company succeeds or not. Of course, like revenue shares, options, whatever. But point being is that we make our monthly salary, whatever happens, and that salesperson, if they lose that deal, bye half of their compensation. My point is, you need to always have the empathy and also the energy to sit down with the sales leader and understand what they're working on, what they worry about, and have that like real true empathy to other people's plight, rather than just digging your heels and being like, they're wrong, I'm right. That's my number one tip that I would give my younger self all the time. As kind of a close partner to that is, it's never too early to get fascinated by customer value and business value.
Love it.
I think one of my things really is that one of my like things of where I'm seeing product management kind of lose some of its value almost, is I genuinely believe product management emerged because designers and engineers couldn't give a poop about the commercial side. So we needed somebody in the R&D team to care about customer values, to care about business value. But since then, we've actually started seeing a generation of engineers and designers emerge who are very commercially minded. Call them product engineers, call them product designers, whatever you want to call them. But like basically people who think commercially while executing on a technical craft. And then lastly, now with AI, it's like lowered the threshold even more for somebody to be curious and to understand the whole end to end. So I think like that's kind of showing that commercial awareness now is even more valuable than before.
True, I agree. And what is the third one?
And the third one, I think it's basically, there's no shame in wanting to be a builder. And this is very counterintuitive because I specifically stepped away from builder roles to become a kind of leader and executive, and I've stayed away from professional builder roles for the last 10 plus years. But I've also started seeing a lot of people, and again, AI has dramatically accelerated that, seeing a lot of people very disillusioned with their careers because they made the jump from builder, which they loved, to leader or manager, which they hate. Because even though as like kind of technical people, we are systems thinkers at heart, and building organizations is systems thinking as well, managing humans is not fun. It's very rewarding.
I agree. It's completely. I mean, it's people come with different background, philosophy. It's a job. I agree.
Yeah. And it's also the most amazing thing, like when you get to coach somebody who truly deserves it and truly will run with what you give them. But not every situation is like that. And especially in the before AI days, the only leverage you could have is building big organizations. And so the role of a manager or leader was you invariably had to build large organizations, mixed bag of people. And then, of course, if you're never firing people, you're not doing your job. So, and that's hard. Like that's just mentally, it kills you inside when you have to
True.
do those, like
I agree.
put people on pips, fire them, replace them with, and so
It's not
you
fun.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah, and you don't have to do that, right? Like you can stay if you're genuine, if you like reflect on what you enjoy about your work, and if you get a thrill out of solving a hard puzzle or releasing a really fun feature that you like spend time working, that's fun as heck. And especially now again with AI, where I genuinely believe we're going to challenge this whole like, well, there's a Scrum team that's like 3 to 5 engineers and a product manager and a product designer and whatever. That's all going out the window, and
True.
we're kind of Dunbar's number doesn't matter anymore, and we're building kind of, we're going to have to start rethinking the way we build organizations, which is a lot more like leaner, meaner, flatter. um, there's a much bigger premium on great all around builders. And
Mm.
so what I would probably say, again, hindsight's 2020, and I'm very happy with my career and choices I've made, but if I was at that junction, especially now when, back when I made that change, AI wasn't a thing, and building was still a lot more of a tedious process. It's not the only way to build a career. And again, I don't know if the CTO story listeners want this advice, but that's not the only path. That linear path up the ranks is not the only path. If
Mm.
you genuinely get joy out of building, never stop building.
Yeah, that's true. Great. Thank you so much, Tommy. So we'll look forward now for the fireside round. Are you ready? So we'll
Yes.
be questioning, answering very, very quick. It will be
Yep.
very much 5 minutes of like fireside round. So
Yep.
perfect. So let's get started for that. Great. It just will be one line answer for everything. Yeah. I mean, so
Yep.
it'll be very, very fast. Biggest thing that you got wrong in your career when you were writing, you haven't written that publicly. What is that one thing? Like during your journey, one thing that you got wrong, but you haven't publicly written anywhere.
Man, it's hard because I've aired all my dirty laundry pretty actively, publicly. I don't have any major regrets. I've made so many mistakes. None of them are like interesting enough. I've shared all the really gnarly ones. Could have made a ton of different decisions, but I'm actually pretty happy with the
Oh, great.
things
A
I've
company
done.
is whose CTO you most respect, and specifically why.
Mm. Oh my God, your questions are super hard. Who do I respect the most? I mean, not a CTO, and
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can
do
tell
that
any
often.
CXO. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, I have a massive respect now for CEOs who come from a technology background, who are not shy about deploying code themselves. I
Love
mean,
it.
Toby from Shopify, like he's a technologist. Every bone in him is a technologist, but he's the CEO. But he's never, his pull request amounts have never been higher than now that he's like
Love it.
fully AI build. So
Love it.
I don't like all of his outcome like outpourings on X, but I like the way he runs his company.
Yeah, love it. The one book that changed how you think, not about the product, not
Yep,
about the business, but about the people.
easy one. Five dysfunctions of a team. It connects especially some of the stuff we talked about earlier with like
Great.
a CTO looking sideways in the org chart.
Great. Yeah, love it. Wartime or peacetime? Which kind of company you love to work with?
Obviously, as a product person, you love working at peacetime companies, but the fact is they're very few and far between. So if you don't know how to work in wartime, you're not a very useful product leader. So hard to answer exactly.
I thought you will answer like a wartime. But anyways,
I mean, I love wartime because it's rarer to find product leaders who know how to behave in wartime. So it gives me
mm,
satisfaction.
mm.
But everything's just so much calmer and kind of kinder in peacetime. So who wouldn't love that?
Yeah, perfect. No, get it. The one thing that a founder most needs to hear, but will almost never wants to do that. So what is that based on your?
What got you what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah, okay, great. Um, at the private equity where you are working right now, um, what do you think like you was not aware when you joined, but now you know? Like, oh, this is a crucial skill that I need to be aware about that.
when you're at a fund, VC fund, PE fund, everything gets talked through the language of investment and finance. It doesn't matter what role you have. You have to be fluent in the language of finance.
Numbers. Okay. Good. One decision you made purely based on instinct, like with zero data. Like you think like this is going crazy, but you don't have a data to prove. Let's say in the private equity fund as well, you talk about only numbers. But in your previous life as well, any decision that you made purely based on the instinct without any data. But and
Pretty
then it
much,
turned out with the right call.
pretty much every freaking career decision I've ever made.
Love it. Love it. Oh, what is the question no podcast host has ever asked you that you actually want to answer?
I actually think you by you asking me about the music past is the thing that I think I should have talked more about in other podcasts. It's just so important how it's resonated through my career. Things I learned from booking independent shows and releasing records and doing all that stuff.
As a CTO leaders, you have been so experienced throughout this your journey. What is one thing that you think you want to change in yourself?
I think I want to go back to building more.
Do you not?
I'm so happy when I'm building now.
Great, love it. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you so much. It was loving talking to you, and hope we got our audience got a lot of knowledge from this. I personally got a lot of knowledge right now, being hearing from you, Tommy, who been very experienced player in this industry. Love it, Tommy. Keep building, keep solving the problems. We still love to you doing the guitar. I can see in the back playing the guitar and solving the puzzle and solving the problems. Love it. I think
Yeah.
music tech that's where I started my first startup in 2019. Miserably, our fund dried, and in 2021, we moved into again a consulting, and then now we again back into voice AI. Love it. Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Tommy. Thanks for your time. Have a good one. Bye.
I appreciate it. You as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this video so far. Hope you like this podcast. Make sure you subscribe and share with other CTOs and founders. CTO's job is not that much easy. It's hard. We need to make sure as a CTO that company win. At every stage, the CTO's role keep changing, keep evolving. At the end of the day, you have to perform well, make sure company wins. Either it's a technical decision or it is connected with the technical plus financial decision. As a CTO, you have to make sure you are on top of that. It's not your only technical responsibilities. You are a CXO. Make sure you justify your job description and you justify your role as well. If you think you are not at the right position or you are not fulfilling what a CTO has to do, you have to think one more time. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to this channel and see you again. Thank you.